say your name and your title.
I'm Senator Don Benton, the Deputy Majority Leader in the State Senate and the Vice Chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, which ultimately is where this decision will be decided. I'm pleased that the Governor came to Clark County today to hear from our citizens, but it's unfortunate that the guest list was handpicked and only supporters. The Governor did not have an opportunity to hear from members of the community that are greatly concerned about this project moving forward. He seems to have been misinformed about some of the facts, unfortunately, because he repeatedly talked to the group about how congestion would be greatly improved, while people are upset about it now and there may be opposition now after it's built and everything's wonderful and they're flying across the bridge without any congestion. They'll love it. So it's painful now, but they'll love it when it's done. Unfortunately, he hasn't read the CRC's own research, and the CRC's own projections indicate that when the bridge is completed, the gain in travel time or commute time will be 1 minute. 1 minute is not a very good result for spending $3.6 billion. So we're very concerned about that, and we're very concerned about some of the facts. The other grave concern that I had an opportunity to raise with the Governor while I was there was the 6,000 permanent high-wage jobs that will be lost upriver if the height of the bridge is not mitigated. So I'm very concerned about that as well.
You're interested in meeting with the Governor. He's made himself available down
4,000
right
direct jobs in Metal Thompson, fabrication, Greenbury, industrial, a couple of others that are in the Columbia Business Center will be directly affected by this because their products will no longer be able to get under the bridge. And their locations, of course, are east of the bridge. There are 2,000 indirect jobs that feed those 4,000 direct jobs. And they're high-paying manufacturing jobs in our community that will be lost if the height of the bridge is not corrected. That is of grave concern not only to those employers and those people that have those jobs, but to all the ancillary businesses in Vancouver that feed those employees, you know, that service them, that sell them cars, and so on and so forth. So while the 2,000 or less than 2,000 jobs that will be temporary in constructing the bridge is what is always trotted out as a reason to do the project, they pale in comparison to the 6,000 permanent high-wage jobs that will be lost if the height of the bridge isn't corrected.
I have to take issue with your premise. I mean,
it's not a premise, it's a fact.
Well, just that the Governor is incorrect, but I mean,
that may be a premise.
Right, the fact that
maybe he just chose not to discuss it.
So, what should legislators who are maybe hearing from the ports or who are hearing from the unions in their area, I mean, what should they make of this discrepancy?
The legislators should say, what about the jobs we already have, and are they in jeopardy? And the answer is yes, they are. And that's the issue. These are jobs that are already here. Families that are already here, companies that are already here, paying a good wage. And we stand to lose these companies and lose these jobs at a time when our unemployment rate is already extremely high in this county.
Isn't that what mitigation's all about?
That's right, and if it can be mitigated, great. But what about future development upriver? This will be the lowest bridge on the river for 190 miles. So all future development, say we mitigate those four. One of them I don't think we'll ever be able to mitigate. They're operating on a 400-ton dock, and the next closest 400-ton dock is in Corpus Christi, Texas. So I don't think one will ever be able to mitigate. But let's say we do. What about the future businesses upriver that will never come because they can't get their products under the bridge? And what about high water mark? Because right now the CRC's estimates use low water mark for the bridge height. So we're very concerned about that. And that's just one concern. If that's not enough to cause a slow down red flag, what about light rail? What about Metro's financial situation? It's not good if you've been following it. And the taxpayers of Washington do not want Metro to put their hand in the pockets of the taxpayers of Washington. And that's what will happen if we bring light rail to Vancouver. So do you ignore the citizens you represent, as the legislators in the 49th district are doing? If you look at the vote last November, the governor's premise that, oh, it was one funding mechanism is preposterous. It was 1/10 of 1%. Do you really think that anybody would prefer a different mechanism than 1/10 of 1 cent on the dollar? Of course it wasn't about that. Go to WashingtonPolicy.org and read the Washington Policy Center's analysis of Proposition 1 in September, before the vote. And you will see that a thoughtful researcher explained exactly what Prop 1 was about. It was about bringing light rail to Vancouver, period, end of story. Please go to WashingtonPolicy.org and read that research. And I think you'll get a very different point of view than what is being put out by the Department of Transportation and the Governor's office.
Is that 6,000 jobs, is that assuming that those businesses will just leave? Is that how you got that figure?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
if they can't get their product past the bridge, they're not going to stay in Vancouver. They're not going to just close their business up and go home. They'll move their business somewhere else where they can operate. Okay.
What do you expect to happen in the Senate this year on this issue?
Well, I have a letter right here from the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee that makes it very clear that unless the height of the bridge is corrected and light rail comes off the project, he will not approve a transportation funding package in the Senate this year for the Columbia River Crossing project. And Curtis King is a great leader and a great senator, and when he says something and when he gives his word, if you know him like I do, he means it. He's not going to allow $450 million in funding for this project as long as light rail remains a part of it, and especially if the height is not corrected.
His
So what's
co-chair
the
on that
government
committee
doing
has
here?
said do it though. How is that going to be reconciled?
Well, the Senate rules give co-chairman veto power. So as long as Curtis King maintains his position, there won't be funding in that budget because he has the power to veto it as chairman or co-chairman of transportation. And that's the way the Senate rules read. When we built the coalition majority and we offered 6 committees to the Democrats to share power for the first time in the history of the state of Washington, we wrote it that way because we wanted it to truly be a bipartisan majority. And so when Senator Ide accepted the chairmanship, she also accepted equal authority on that committee to King and vice versa.
Okay.
So that's the way that was set up in our rules. I don't see that changing. Okay.